from the department, and then we can jump straight in. So we'll just start the meeting at 10 past instead of on at 8 o'clock. Thanks, everyone. the Standing Committee Chair for Finance, Economic Opportunities and Tourism. And it's great to have you all with us today as we look at working on the negotiating mandate for the National Small Enterprises Amendment Bill. So with that, I would just like to give the members an opportunity to introduce themselves as well. Members.
Good morning, Chair. Rodriguez van der Westhuizen, member of the committee.
Good morning, Chair. Mbulela Isaac Silegu, member of the committee.
Thank you, members. With that, I'd also like to give the officials online an opportunity to introduce themselves.
Morning, Chairperson. Romeo Mastop, Legal Advisor assisting this committee. Thank you.
I believe we do have an official who's joined us from the department. Ms. Kukumur.
Good day, it's Elise Kukumur. I'm from the Department of Small Business Development. I'm waiting for my DDG, Ms. Delwa, to also join. Thank you.
Okay, I think we can. I see Ms. Delwa online. Ms. Delwa, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Chairperson. Provincial DDG for Enterprise Development, Innovation and Entrepreneurship at the Department of Small Business Development.
Okay, thank you very much, and a warm welcome to everyone.
Good morning, Chair. Member Brankhuis, member of the committee. Thank you very much.
Good morning, Member Brankhuis. Welcome. I just want to check, is there anyone else who'd like to introduce themselves before we get started? Okay, I see none. All right, with that, just a reminder, throughout the process or duration of this call, if you can please keep yourselves muted or your video off until such time that you're called on to speak. Essentially, the program for today is the department will brief us on the responses for the submissions, and then from there, the committee will deliberate on the information contained in the matrix, and then we will go through our indication on whether the department has concluded with its responses, and we can discuss whether and how we want to take or consider the different sections. Then from there, we conclude, we will excuse the department and move on with our negotiating mandate. There will be an opportunity for questions, essentially, safe to say, after the department has presented. So with that, if we can please hand over to the department just to take us through the deliberation on the matrix. Can I check which official from the department will be taking us through the deliberations on the matrix, just on your departmental submissions and responses? Okay, I see Ms. Kukumur is shared.
Thank you, Chairperson. Yes, indeed, Ms. Kukumur will take the committee through the comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair and honourable members. The first comment is a general comment, and it's noted by the department. It's appreciate the amendments as proposed in the bill and seek to foster a more conducive environment. So that is noted by the department. The second one is the role of local government in relation to its new agency is not spelled out. Not all provisions are, we're talking about the bill, and what we've submitted is the bill, and what is also available for members to look at is the memorandum of objects as well as the SAIA's report. But the relationships as they currently are, it's three existing entities that's going to be merged. Of course, the relationship with government is also remains very important, and all of this is underpinned by the NISIT. That is the National Integrated Strategy for Enterprise Development, and core of that strategy is saying that there needs to be closer alignment between national, provincial, as well as local as well. And then, of course, all the agencies that goes with that. So the intention of the department in terms of making sure that we foster closer collaboration and cooperation is clear in our strategy and in everything that we do. So, but the provisions in the Act does not speak specifically to those relationships, but it as I indicated, it is underpinned in our NIST strategy. And that we're also even saying in the NIST strategy that what's currently in place is not good enough. It needs to be strengthened. And we had consultations with all government, with all provinces, except with Western Cape, because there was just no time that we could find with Western Cape, and the meetings continued. So we're still seeking that consultation, but consultations is a priority, and that is what we're focusing on, and making sure that we foster closer collaboration. It is further hoped that the consolidation would lead to SETFA improving its service delivery and footprint across the city. This is indeed the objective of SETFA, is to improve service delivery throughout the department, throughout the country. And yeah, there's another statement that also further relates to that later on. Currently, the small enterprise face major challenges in terms of late payments, and then this impacts negatively on the cash flow of businesses. This is exactly the reason, one of the reasons why the department and why the department, what is currently in the bill, came as a result of consultations with the constituencies and small enterprises, and 30-day payment was one of the biggest complaints. Then it is also said, and it's not maybe here, but it came later on, where it says that it should be strengthened. So, but this is one of the main reasons why we brought in 30-day payment. The Ombud is to deal with 30-day payment, and it specifically also say that it deals with government non-compliance to 30-day payment as well. So apart from the provisions in the PFMA, the Ombud will further strengthen those provisions in making sure that governments do pay within 30 days. We know that at the moment, the biggest culprits in terms of non-payment is Western Cape is doing well, but some of our other provinces are not doing so well, especially on a local level. Accountable, yeah, because this is it provides for accountability for authorities for accounting authorities. The PFMA is already doing that, but it's not happening. So the bill goes further by enabling the Ombud to make binding determinations on late payment. The bill will also stipulate the rights of small enterprises, and these rights, one of these rights include the right to be paid on time and to be paid interest on late payments. So that is now stipulated in the bill, that that's a right of a small enterprise. Load shedding is providing is a big issue, and it has negative impacts on small enterprises. That is the comment that came from the province, and this is noted, and it's various initiatives across all the provinces are put in place to deal with load shedding and the impact that has on small enterprises, and it's not something that is catered for in the legislation itself. The South Africa's rigid labour laws have come under increased scrutiny. And yes, differential treatment is important, and is something that we also always trying to also foster, but it needs to happen within the within what is democratically acceptable. And the department has published in terms of business licensing. Department has now published its policy about 2 weeks ago, and comments on that policy would be greatly appreciated. And it's not the provisions in the bill. The objective of public hearings is to comment on the bill. So I found that a lot of the comments that came through was not really about provisions in the bill, but it was about implementation and strategies and things that goes around that. But we have tried to comment to that as far as possible. Where possible, the bill should allow for the relevant data to be disaggregated to a local government or lower levels. The Act currently allow for annual reviews. And we are trying as much as possible to disaggregate that data. We had been in consultations with National Treasury in terms of their data systems, because we're using their data systems that they get also then, of course, from SARS and bodies reporting to them. And we continuously striving to improve data. And we will continue to work with National Treasury, because we looked at the possibility of breaking down this data even down to a district level. But this is consultations between us and National Treasury, and that we continuously trying to improve the data availability. Because that will also, because it help us to target better. You will notice that one of the NIST objective is also that we should start targeting better in terms of geographic locations, which is very much the responsibility of provinces, but also in terms of the size categories, and be very direct and explicit in terms of what it is that we want to achieve within a specific size category of small enterprise. And that requires us to have more and improved data. We're also working on the SME databases in terms of which we are wanting to improve data information availability on SMEs, both formal and informal, so that we can also work with the informal, because currently there's very little data available on informal. So the message I want to drive here is this is key and an area that is also of concern for the department. The agency's powers and functions, in addition to the functions of the agency, it also includes foster economic inclusion by promoting participation. This is part of the government policy and implementation through various programs. Apart from this, also, there was also a lot of comments that we've received during the portfolio committee process that were saying that the bill, the bill should not be racial. So it's a massive responsibility that we have in terms of balancing these kind of provisions in the legislation. And we have to provide to make sure that whatever we have in the legislation is aligned to the Constitution. And that is why the bill had to go through the Oxley process. But fostering economic inclusion by promoting participation in the development of small enterprise in historically disadvantaged and less formal areas is a key focus area of the department. We are currently also working on a policy for townships and rural areas, which is focusing on exactly this area. So although it might not be that explicit in the legislation, this is a key focus area of the department and can be seen in our MTSF objectives and our APP targets that we've putting forward, that this is a key area for focus in the department. The finances of the agency, it is suggested that the procedures should also set out the service standards, include timeframes for consideration and granting of financial and non-financial support services. The service standards are not defined in the legislation, but will be set in the agency by the agency in collaboration with the role players. So this is again an area where it's not doesn't form part of the legislation itself, but forms part of the strategy and the governance of the agency once it's set up, and it's already written into that as well. The overlap of jurisdiction of the Ombud, there we have went into detail through the portfolio committee process. The department went into detail with the parliamentary legal advisors on this matter of overlap. But even before that, when we've published the bill for public comment, one of the first things, the focus areas was on this, that it will overlap with existing alternative dispute resolution bodies, that it will overlap with provisions of the Competition Commission. The Competition Commission has a specific area where it specifically focuses on transformation, but it is only in specific sectors that applies, and it's very limited. So we had detailed consultations with the Competition Commission on that, and they responded to us in writing, confirming that what is in our legislation complements what is in their legislation, and it does not duplicate. And we've also consulted with the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition on this matter. So the information is there, and we have made sure that we don't duplicate, and it's definitely doesn't duplicate with what is currently in the competition legislation. And then this section is really dealing with red tape. Although the Western Cape government supports the establishment of the Ombud and services for small enterprises, the bill is in its current form cannot be supported as it's seriously flawed and requires extensive revision. In addition, the bill misses the opportunity to address many of the red tape challenges affecting small enterprises, including the administrative and compliance burden associated with doing this. The red tape reduction provisions are provided for currently in Chapter 2 as part of the functions of the advisory body, and in Chapter 4, Clause 18. In addition to these legislative provisions, various policies and program interventions at national as well as provincial level are in place to reduce red tape reduction. The department works closely with the Red Tape Reduction Office in the presidency. Business registration provisions and licensing provisions are not provided for in the Small Business Act, but appropriate legislation such as the Companies Act as well as the Business Act of 1991 and the Companies Act deals with some of these provisions that are referred to under this area of complaint. And as I indicated, the department has published the business licensing policy, and comments on that would be appreciated. There's already, the department is working with, there's a provincial meeting that is taking place later this week, where the Western Cape province plays a key role in making sure that we address all concerns on red tape. Red tape is not just at the legislative impediment level, but also at the administrative simplification process. All of this is looked at, and Western Cape is actively participating in these initiatives. So the legislative provisions are there. It's not that they're not there, they are there, but they supported through various policy and program interventions. And then it's this point has been made during the portfolio committee comments as well by the Western Cape, and saying that it is pointed out that it has language and drafting errors. So the bill, all bills needs to go through the OXLA process, and the bill and OXLA confirmed that the bill is consistent with the Constitution and properly drafted in the form and style which conforms to legislative practice. So the comments from the provinces also goes to OXLA. And if there is anything that OXLA felt that they have missed, that will be attended through directly by OXLA. They are the custodians and the experts in terms of legislative drafting and compliance to constitutional requirements. The establishment of the Ombud service should not come at the cost of the advisory body. The bodies are vital to the ecosystem within which small enterprises operated and may easily feed into each other to facilitate a more conducive environment in which to do business. The Ombud service is not established to replace the advisory body. The advisory body and the Ombud service have different functions as stipulated in the Act. That of the advisory body is stipulated in the Act, and that of the Ombud is in the bill. Two very different institutions with different functions and responsibility, of course, complementing each other, but definitely not the one replacing the other. I may also note that we are in the process of establishing the ombud, the advisory body. You will recall that for the last couple of years it was not operational. That is being corrected, and we will. It was supposed to be in the Government Gazette last Friday, but hopefully it will be in the Constitution will be in the Government Gazette this Friday. And one of the key areas that we're also looking at on the advisory body is strengthening red tape reduction. So, we will share with all the provinces once the Constitution was published for inputs and comments, and inputs from the Western Cape would be greatly appreciated. Then the Ombud has a wide discretionary power. This again during the portfolio committee, and then it's referring to a Daewoo judgment. During the portfolio committee comments process, this was dealt with. This is the other area that was dealt with in detail. That is about the discretionary powers of the minister of the Ombud, and then also under unfair business practices, the discretionary powers of the minister. This was dealt with in detail during the portfolio committee deliberations, and it was pointed out and confirmed by the parliamentary legal advisors that this is not the case. The detail is provided in this comments, and it's also can be obtained from the portfolio committee documentation. It's not clear whether a SAYAS was conducted and the matter required in terms of SAYAS considered. A SAYAS was conducted and the certificate was issued, and that's all available. The memorandum of objectives refers to a business case. The business case was developed, and as far as I know, during the briefing with Western Cape government on the public hearings, copies of this was required and was made available to the province. Some amendments in the bill have been made to infer greater involvement of consultation with provincial authorities. The active participation of provincial authorities should be provided for to give effect to the bills. To further strengthen the participation of provinces, the bill requires that members of the board for the new agency must be representative of the 9 provinces. This is also, I think, an amendment that came through the portfolio committee processes, and so provinces will be representative, and then the obligation is on the provinces to make sure that whoever is representing them on that board does make sure that all matters are attended to and addressed. The Small Enterprise Finance Agency established and shareholder of the agency. It is recommended that a clear separation be made of the indicators for financial and non-financial support. Okay, the primary legislation doesn't set the objectives and set the objectives and the functions of the agencies. The service delivery standards and indicators for monitoring and evaluation form part of the governance of the agency and is not part of the legislation. So again, it's important that those things be attended through the agency, and with the Western Cape having a representative on the board, I think there is some direct involvement in terms of making sure that that will be the case. And these things are important and needs to be complied with. The agency powers and functions, while uniformly applied, it is recommended that the standard national delivery network undertakes a separate focus to ensure the agency's delivery meets the needs of small businesses seeking support. The objective is to ensure equitable service delivery. Okay. I think the focus is here that the agency meets its needs. National delivery undertakes a spatial. Yeah, the focus was here that it must take a spatial focus. The objective is to ensure equitable service delivery to avoid unfair and discrimination in service delivery, but based on the information by the unique service delivery needs of small enterprises in the different geographic areas. So although there's a standard that is it does not take away the need to focus on the specific needs of small enterprises in specific geographic locations. And that is also supplemented through the provincial support. It is recommended that the bill prescribes the skills composition of the board, the proposed functions, empowering the minister. Okay, the bill provides for a transparent process for the selection of the board members that includes a matrix of agreed skills. The skills, knowledge, and experience required should be informed by the objectives of the agency. So this is a very big thing in terms of what do you include, what do you not include, and at the end through the public consultation processes as well as through the portfolio committee process, that it was felt that to make provision for this transparent process, and that the board will that matrix must then have the agreed skills, and the board will of course then everybody will be involved and it will be consulted, and that will be an open, transparent process, and whatever skills are required must be aligned to the objectives, of course, and the functions of the agency. There we received a lot of the establishment of the Ombuds service. It's recommended that the composition of the employees' budget is not placed under further pressure to set up the new office. Further, where regional offices are established, it is recommended that the ombuds will be appointed on a needs basis. That is, the deputy ombuds will be appointed on a needs basis. So, and we this is through consultations with DPSA. They encourage us. Initially, we wanted to set in place a separate entity, and it's complete with all its requirements. And the DPSA has then warned us against that, and they said, no, let it be, you establish the ombud, and there will be an office in the department, and allow it to organically grow based on the needs and the requirements. So we followed, and we specifically, DPSA made sure that we focused on that and make sure that that is what we focus on. So, and then the appointment of the ombud and the deputy ombud, it's recommended that the bill be revised to make provision for an acting ombud. The bill does provide for deputy ombuds, which can then, of course, act when the ombud for one or other reason can't fulfill its functions. So that is provided for, and it's proposed that the remuneration should not exceed the level of the Deputy Director General. There are processes, there are legislative and guidelines in place in terms of the setting of remuneration for the ombuds as well as all state agencies. And that is a process that needs to be followed in consultation between our minister and the Minister of Finance. So it will be done in terms of existing guidelines and legislation that is providing for that. The proposed section G1 refers, the proposed section uses the word, okay, this is again where it becomes very technical, because it talks about adjudicate and adjudication and deny the process. The bill was certified by Oxlaw, so they've looked at all these provisions and they made sure that it's complied to the Constitution and it's properly drafted in the style which confirms to legislative practices. I've highlighted these areas in yellow because I'm also referring this through the Oxlaw process, so that they can just re-look at these areas to make sure that it is actually indeed correct based on the complaints that came from your province. And then again, it's about decide and getting very technical about decide and determine. And again, the bill was certified, and the office and the director provides administrative support. I think there's a specific recommendation about further. It's rather the object of the director to do these reports, and they are not approved by the ombud. So the legislation is very broad, and they provide for this, and the director will provide for the administrative support to the ombud. And in terms of normal practice, it's probably going to be the case that the director will draft the report and it will be approved by the Ombud. But what the legislation wants to make sure is that the Ombud ultimately takes responsibility and approving of documentation that is submitted. The reference is made to the following wording: in the manner he or she deems fit, when he or she deems fit, but is as soon as possible. Again, this is legislative wording, and the bill went through the Oxlaa process. And the reason why this is yellow is because I'm just again referring that to make sure that your concerns are really addressed, and that Oxlaa gives special attention to these areas. The next section is again the same. Proposed provision states report or finding, recommendation or determination in respect of an investigation by the Ombud must be open to the public. So it is recommended that the time frame be specified regarding the length of time within which the documentation is to be made available. So the bill was certified, and we will again ask Oxlaa to make sure that what is in the bill currently is acceptable in terms of the Constitution. Determinations by the Ombud will make determinations and copies. Yes, this is where the proposed section of the bill provide that the Ombud may take a final determination on the merits and complaints that was not amicably resolved. This is therefore implied that the Ombud will have adjudication powers. The proposed section is, however, silent on what the process will be followed. So yes, this is an area where to counter this, where the final determinations will be made by the Ombud. It was made that copies of those determinations will be submitted to the court that otherwise would have adjudicated on matters such as this, to make sure that it's a fair and open process. And then also there is specific reference made to judicial review that also makes sure that a fair process was followed. So we've built in the counter provisions to make sure that whatever decision is taken by the Ombud will be a fair decision, and it needs to comply with normal court procedures. Again, the issue of remuneration of the chief director, again, these things are done in terms of existing government guidelines and existing legislative provisions under the Department of Finance. The provisions state that within 3 months after the end of each financial year, the bill state that the accountability should be aligned to the PFMA requirements. So this is questioning, I think, areas where it says that it should be 2 months or it should be 3 months. The bill is clear that it must be compliant to the PFMA. So whatever the PFMA, if the PFMA changes tomorrow and it says 1 month, then it must be 1 month. If a PFMA requires it to be 2 months, it must be 2 months. If PFMA requires it to be 3 months, it must be 3 months. So the PFMA will set those requirements, and the Ombud and whatever body is established under this Act needs to comply with that. Then is about the regulations applied to the Ombud. The bill should provide guidance on the type of case fees that the office may. There is a specific area in the legislation that refers to that, and there is specific that certain when it comes to the setting of fines, that there is some guidance that's provided for in court documents and in legislative provisions, and that is what needs to be complied with. So, Section 17 is able to make regulations, and the process of making regulations allows for transparent and public comments. But in addition to that, there is also these certain, especially when it comes to fines, there are certain limits that are set by law also that needs to be complied with. The proposed section states that any interested person may, subject to discretion of the Ombud, and apply regulations of confidentiality, obtain a copy of any record by the Ombud, and then it says it is unclear whether provisions is compliant with the POPI Act. And so again, Oxlaa went through the bill. Oxlaa confirmed that it's consistent with the Constitution and properly drafted. So Oxlaa would have picked this up, but we will again just highlight this area to Oxlaa as well. This 3 months period, I think it's again the 3 month period and a 2 months period, and what is referred to, and that again we not the bill is clear. It must comply with PFMA, and the Ombud does needs to comply with the PFMA and requires as the PFMA is applicable to alternative dispute resolution bodies. So again, it's PFMA, and if the PFMA sets different requirements for national or for provincial or for alternative dispute resolution bodies, whatever that the PFMA requirements are, that is what the Ombud will have to comply with. It is noted that the office may take any step conducive to stakeholder education and the promotion, and then it appears almost a courtesy inclusion. Again, the legislation, primary legislation, makes the provision for the office to do that. If it's not for that provision in the legislation, the Ombud would not be able to do that. So the provision is made that how it's going to be done, and the detail in terms of how it's going to be done will form part of the governance structures, regulations, and subordinate legislation, which of course then will have to be set through consultative and process through Government Gazette. And then the proposal should be expanded to more explicitly outline the nature and scope of the interagency coordination and collaboration to promote the principles of the objective of the bill. So again, all that the primary legislation do is saying that if there's areas of duplication, and if there's another agency or another structure that can do this work, then you must consult with that institution to avoid duplications. So the objective is to make provision for the promoting of interagency coordination and collaboration as provided for in terms of existing legislation, and not to be prescriptive, specifically given that the Ombud will be newly established with no evidence to inform such detail. So there's a specific reason why primary legislation is not descriptive in terms of provisions such as this, but is enabling. And that is exactly what this section is trying to do, is to enable for this function to be performed by the Ombud. Then this is the other area, it's unfair trading practices. The proposed provision prohibits unfair trading practices, although supported. The proposed section appears to be shoehorned and into a Principal Act. Only by the face of it, it appears to encroach on the jurisdiction of the Department of Trade and Industry and the Competition Commission, which are mandated and duly resourced. While the need for the protection of small enterprises is clear, it should not take the form of duplicating. Again, and this was also explained through the portfolio committee process, as well as through our public consultation process. This was consulted with the Competition Commission, as well as with the Department of Trade and Industry and Competition, and it is not duplicating what they currently have. It is complementary, and they are that one area where the Competition Commission, because the Competition Commission is mostly about competition and it's not about, it does not deal with business-to-business practices. There is one area where it does deal with business-to-business practices, but that is very specific, only to specific transformation issues, and very specifically only in terms of certain sectors. It excludes other sectors. And those sectors will only come out also once the minister say they declare those sectors to become applicable. Also, before the minister can declare any practice to be unfair trading practice, before she can even make that declaration, she must consult with the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. And the reason for that is exactly to make sure that as the legislation evolves and the Competition Commission might declare more sectors, that we do not duplicate. So the provisions are all in place to make sure that there is no duplication, and it has been confirmed. And also by the Parliamentary Legal Advisory Committee that there is no duplication. I think it also that it's wide discretionary powers, and that it can that the minister might have too much powers. You will recall that through the portfolio committee process, through the portfolio committee process, this was also a concern, and they've added a condition that the minister may, on recommendation of the Ombud, so they've included, so the minister may not on her own now just declare certain or declare the intention to declare certain practice. It must be on recommendation by the Ombud. And the Ombud can only do such recommendations based on evidence. And the evidence can only be obtained through research or through research or actual case studies that they've dealt with. So it's no longer, and then also the legislation is set the parameters, and I think it's very clearly set the way that the parliamentary legal advisors responded to that when it went through the portfolio committee process. It was they said that this is exactly what the manner in which this provision is written is exactly what primary legislation should do. So they've regarded this actually as a good example of how these provisions should be provided for in primary legislation by setting first the rights of the small enterprises. So the minister cannot, based on the recommendation of the minister of the Ombud, do anything that is not in line with that the rights of small enterprises. And those rights are stipulated, there's 4 rights that are stipulated in the bill. It then further goes and it says that there's certain principles that must apply. And from the principle, and then it goes further and it says, it describes the processes must be followed. So it sets clear parameters in terms of which the unfair certain business practices as they relate to small enterprises might be declared as unfair trading or business practices. So there's clear parameters set in the primary legislation, and as indicated, this was a focus area, and the parliamentary response to this during the parliamentary advisory response to this through the portfolio committee consultations actually said this as an example of exactly how this type of provisions should be provided for in primary legislation. The national review of small enterprise, it's not clear from the wording whether review is a standard requirement that must be produced on request by the minister, and whether a review shall only be performed on request by the minister. This is the reviews. This is a current provision in the legislation that the minister must do annual, that we must do annual reviews of the small business sector. That is to get data on the small business sector. The reality is that ever since this provision has been catered for in legislation, that it was not possible for the department to go through a tender process, appoint service providers, and have an annual review done in a financial year. So there was a lot of debate that went into the wording in terms of how do you move it from every year to every second year. And this is the wording that the legal team together with Oxlak came up with. So this is an existing provision, and just because of the fact that the current legislation creates the expectation that the department must do it every year, and we have now evidence that it's not possible to do it every year. This is why this wording was amended, and it was amended by the legal advisors in consultation with Oxla. So this is why it reads the way it reads. I think that we then get to the third area of comments, and this was a very strong focus on youth, and youth is there to offer our services. And on this one, youth is one of the priority focus areas for government, and various policy and program interventions are in place that focus on youth development. The Department of Small Enterprises reports on youth support in terms of all programs outcomes to ensure dedicated and targeted support is provided to youth. I think if you look in terms of our MTSF and our IPP targets, we have adopted the process that we report in terms of all our programs, in terms of all our support interventions. We report in terms of the support that went to youth, and that is to make sure that we focus on youth and that there's a youth focus in each and every program that the department has. This is again, this is the George municipality, and this is again about the issue around the provision under 17X. I have responded to it earlier, and also that the response to that is yes, the recommendation is noted, and as indicated, this is an enabling. We've put in this reference to this as an enabling provision to make sure that the Ombud is obligated to consult and to work with other agencies to avoid duplication, should that be the case. And then it's whatever is in the legislations is underpinned by our National Integrated Small Enterprise Development Strategic Framework, our NIST framework. And that has been confirmed by the Minister as the National Strategy for Enterprise Development. So, and that calls for improved collaboration and cooperation amongst within government and with business partners. So it's not just limited to improved government collaboration, but also with business partners. And this strategy supports what the provisions that is in the primary legislation. The Director General must, at the request of the Minister, this is again to the national review that I just spoke to. That is the review that is done that used to be done, or that the Act used to require that needs to be done every year, and that we now only going to do every 2 years. And that is just the wording in terms of how that was agreed to be done. Barriers and constraints faced by small enterprises are key focus areas of these annual reviews, and as well as feedback on possible recommendations in terms of how to address that. Furthermore, the advisory body, as I indicated, is the mouthpiece of small enterprises, and this is also a key focus area of them. So there's different processes. Although there's the work that the department do parallel to that, there's also the work of the advisory body, what they will do as the mouthpiece of small enterprises, talking to exactly these constraints. Then the establishment of a SETFA. The department has a dedicated unit. Okay, I think the concern was that are still struggling to access funds through SETFA and the national. Okay, the department has a dedicated unit working on red tape reduction that covers legislation impediments as well as administrative simplification, as I indicated earlier. And these interventions are coordinated through role players, including government agencies such as SIDA, SIFA, and CBDA, that will now be merged into SETFA. So these things are catered for in terms, although they're not in the primary, there might be enabling provisions in the legislation that is not supported through detail, but this detail will either be in regulations, guidelines, or is in the NIST strategy. I think that is the last of the comments we received, and yeah, thank you, Chairperson, and thank you, honourable members and colleagues.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kukumur. So with that, we'll just give the members an opportunity just to ask any questions that they might have on the responses or any of the officials who've joined online as well. So I'm just going to open up the floor. And members, officials, if you could raise your hand to indicate. Member van der Westhuizen.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you to Mrs. Kokemoer for taking us through the matrix. Thank you very much. I must say I find it a pity that we do not have the responses from those that raised those issues. And I don't know how many of them are in this meeting this morning from the department, from the City of Cape Town, and others. But my questions will be directed to our legal advisor, and I don't know if you want us to first deal with questions to Mrs. Kokemoer, and then just on, for example, our legal advisor's response to the Dawood court case and the department's response on that one, as well as a number of other, can I call it more legal issues that were raised by those that commented on the bill and made use of the invite to comment on the bill. So from my side, nothing to Mrs. Kokemoer, but first to our legal advisor then. Thank you.
Yes, please proceed with your questions to the legal advisor.
Yeah, thank you. So the first one was then the whole issue of the applicability of the Daewoo court case. The second one was, I think it was the department from the Western Cape that indicated that an alternative dispute mechanism and the word adjudication are not, can I call it, compatible with one another. And then there was a third one, but I'll have to quickly page through the document. Perhaps advocate has already picked up on that one in any case. But if I could get a response to those first two questions, I'll appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'll hand over to Advocate, and Advocate as well. If you have any questions for the department, you're welcome to post them after answering the questions to Member van der Westhuizen.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, with respect to Member van der Westhuizen, I have not read the Dawood case in preparation for this meeting. Member van der Westhuizen's question in that regard is a curveball to me. I can certainly, if it favors the member and the chairperson, indulge in that case and revert in respect of the specific question that he wants me to address. I did not deem the intricacies or the specificities of that case to be particularly substantial in the preparation for this meeting, but I can certainly revert in that regard. Also, insofar as it relates to the terms adjudication, I thought when I read through the responses in the matrix that sufficiently covers the definitions and the need for the use of those specific terms. But if the member is insistent on getting a response from me, I can certainly provide that. I will take guidance in that respect from the chairperson or the committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. In that regard, Member van der Westhuizen, if I can put it to you, do you feel that the details of the Dawood case are needed in order for us to consider and proceed with the negotiating mandate this morning?
Chair, I do know the severe time pressures under which this committee now needs to finish its business for this term. And I would propose that we look at a way of just raising our, can I call it, uncertainty or our questions in this regard to the members of the select committee, and hopefully they will then be able to get some advice on that one. There's also the apparent anomaly between the 3 months and the 2 months, in that the PFMA, which is to be, setting the norm under which the Ombuds Office should be working, which requires a 2-month turnaround time for the financial statements to be prepared, whereas apparently in this proposed legislation, it speaks of 3 months. Now, again, I don't think it's good practice for pieces of legislation to contradict one another, even if one may say, but eventually the can I call it higher order legislation is the PFMA. Then we need an alternate wording, I believe. And again, I would, it's a pity that we're under so much time pressure, because I would have loved our legal advisor to, for example, express an opinion on that so that we could give a definite guidance to the select committee on what the Western Cape's views on this are, and perhaps Advocate Maastop.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sorry, I muted myself there. Perhaps Advocate Maastop might want to express on that one. Thank you.
Okay, I have 2 suggestions on the way forward. Yes, we can just bring in Advocate Maastop for his opinion on your last question. But I do think that this is something that we can add when we get to dealing with the negotiating mandate draft report. We can add under section of additional specific recommendations, the concerns that you've just highlighted. All right, Advocate Maastop.
Chair, in fact, let me volunteer assistance in that regard to draft a concern that will sort of reflect the nuance or the undertones of that's contained in Member van der Westhuizen's question.
Thank you, that's very much appreciated. All right, members, any further questions with regards to the matrix? All right, Ms. Kukumu, Member Seleko.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity and thank you for the presentation. Chair, there's just 2 questions of clarity. One welcomes the 30 days that has been mentioned for the SMMEs to be paid, but we all know that we say things and people don't adhere to those things. What's going to happen if they don't pay SMMEs within 30 days? What is it there in the bill that can actually force or assist SMMEs so that these established businesses actually pay these SMMEs in those 30 days? Because there's no use you put it there and it's just being ignored. I just would want something that would make sure that it actually happens within those 30 days, because we all know what the challenges are in terms of the SMMEs. And secondly, Chair, this is something that is it's actually hurting me as a member of the provincial legislature. That whenever we are dealing with bills, we'll find ourselves, with our backs against the wall whenever it comes to time of consultation. And that particular comment was made again, that they consulted all provinces except the Western Cape. I just would want the department to elaborate as to why there was not enough time for them to consult with the Western Cape pertaining this particular bill. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Member. Member, I would actually like to just add to your question on the 30 days. There was mention of interest being paid. And I think for me, this is quite concerning, interest being paid to the private sector, because I don't understand where the funding would be made available for the interest. I mean, we've already seen massive cuts to the budget because of the wage sector bill. We're under increasing pressure every single year to allocate more funds to disaster relief and move around money, which is not seen as okay according to the Auditor General. So it does place a lot more pressure on us with the increasingly limited resources that we have. And yes, Member Seleko, I do agree with you. The time pressures are extreme. I think it puts us at jeopardy of not being able to conduct meaningful public participation, although we've done our very best to do so. But this is not the way that bills should be processed. Now, to that point, I also think that should be listed as a procedural concern when we get to the draft report of the negotiating mandate. But I'll just hand your question to the department if Ms. Kukumur or Ms. Dalwa could come in, please.
With the approval of Ms. Dalwa, I will take the responses. I think in terms of the responses to Honourable van der Westhuizen, we support that, and I would also advise them to look at the documentation or responses from the portfolio committee on this, because I think the advice, the parliamentary legal advisors were very clear in their responses to this, and as indicated, those areas were highlighted in yellow, because what I am going to do from the department side also to make sure that we are compliant is that we do send this to from our side also, just to again to our legal team as well, but also that we the representative from Oxlade that worked with us on the bill, that he also just again looked at those. I will specifically highlight those 3 areas. In terms of the questions by the last member on 30-day payments, currently the PFMA have regulations, and it holds accounting authorities responsible for non-payment. That's from a government perspective when they don't pay, but those are just never enforced. So what the Act is now doing, it allows the Ombud to take determinations on these late payments. And it states that one of the rights of a small enterprise is to be paid on time. We don't refer to 30-day payments because in many countries, the small enterprises should be paid within 15 days, not even 30 days. So we're looking at actually strengthening that when it comes to small enterprises, and many of the large enterprises are already paying their small enterprises in 30 days. There are even small, for some of the large enterprises that do a certain upfront payment to SMMEs to allow them to procure stock to be able to produce whatever it is that they're ordering from the small enterprise, and that is applaudable, and we welcome that. So, but what the member was asking, what currently this is the case, and it's just not compliant with. So what the Ombud service, what the provision in the Ombud service is specifically that right that we've stipulated there, that small businesses have the right to be paid on time and have the right to interest. So the Ombud will now make determinations. So there will be and based on that, they will be also be able to say that this might be a fine to that as well, and there might be of course interest that the small enterprise lost because of the account not being paid on time. So that is provided for, and the small enterprise doesn't have to go through a long litigation process. It can go through the Ombud alternative dispute resolution process for that, and the determination will then be made by the Ombud. So in terms of the follow-up questions, I'm not sure, because this is interest by the private sector. The interest will be paid by the party who didn't pay on time. So if the private sector didn't pay the small enterprise on time, the private sector, so the guilty party, will pay that interest, not the small enterprise. The small enterprise will receive the interest on that payment that was not done on time. This will, of course, make sure that when government departments and especially municipalities do procure from small enterprises, that they have to make sure that they ring-fence that money so that the money is available. Otherwise, they will have to start paying interest and fines as well as government departments. But Western Cape, I think, is one of the provinces that are always the shining star when it comes to 30-day payments of all provinces. So, but our counter other provinces will have to make sure that the moment they issue orders, that they ring-fence that money and does not use that money for other purposes, but to make sure that the small enterprise is paid on time. So, and then in terms of the time of consultation, on the bill, we have consulted all provinces equally. I just mentioned that in terms of NISIT, We have consulted with Western Cape as being part of the Provincial Coordinating Forum. We have tried to set meetings with your Department of Economic Development. We could not find suitable dates that suit both of us in departments. But so that is the only consultation that's still outstanding. But we are in close collaboration with your Department of Economic Development, and we will have that consultation with them. It's not that it's not going to take place. It's just that we have concluded on all the other provinces, but Western Cape we couldn't find a suitable date. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think let me just see, members, are there any further questions? All right. Ms. Kuku, Ms. Dalwa, I think there's just one concern that I'd like to register on behalf of the committee, and that was in terms of the presentation this morning. So we understand that there was maybe some confusion about what the department's role was in providing those presentations, but I think it's important for us to also communicate that our role requires that we deliberate on the submissions that you have made. So for us, there is no blurring of lines. There's no confusion on stepping on toes. And for future, I think it's important for me to establish for committees going forward that the department's role is really to speak to the comments that they've made, as it's a bill that they have put forward. We understand your role. And then from there, we go on to deliver or deliberate on our negotiating mandate and submit that. So for us, that separation of powers is very clear. And I'd like to just note it for future so that the department isn't confused about their role in terms of this. But members, I would just like to put it to you, or officials, I'd like to put it to you if there are any similar concerns that you'd like to raise in this regard. Okay.
Ms. Delwa, don't you want to come in here?
Apologies. Before I hand over, I'd just like to recognize Advocate Marsdorp. Advocate Marsdorp, and then we'll hand over to Ms. Dalwa.
Yes, thank you, Chairperson. I may want to just hear the department's response. I'm very familiar of the, I noticed that you call it confusion. I'm not sure if it is confusion. I'm very aware of the build-up to this briefing. I would like to hear the department's response to your question, and if need be, if I need to maybe place certain views on record, then with your indulgence, I then will use my speaking opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dalwa.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I think from the department side, the understanding in terms of the delineation of roles is quite clear. I think the confusion from the officials coming out of this process is because of some comments that we have had to deal with, which created a little bit of confusion at the level of the select committee. In our engagement with the select committee, the department was perceived to have gone a little bit over its mandate in relation to this process, and was reminded that it remains a parliamentary process and that the department needs to come in to provide information only and to brief the different committees at both at the NCO, at the level of the select committee and the provincial hearings. So I think the misunderstanding stems from that, rather than the department not understanding fully its role in relation to what we are doing this morning. And I really want to take this opportunity to express our sincere apology, because the way that the situation was handled could have been better handled on our part. So we will correct that going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Advocate Marstorp, are you satisfied?
Yes, Chairperson, I think 30 years into our democracy, I don't think we should end up in a situation where these kind of issues are still issues. We are a legitimate constitutionally mandated platform as a legislature to make laws, and we are obliged constitutionally to pursue any and every opportunity and platform to ensure that submissions made are responded to by a sponsoring executive organ. There should not be any blurring, any unclarity when those things are on the agenda. So I was actually quite fascinated when I heard the build up to this meeting and the almost aversion. Take note, the almost aversion to address this committee. I do not know where that kind of arrogance, that kind of misplaced chauvinism comes from. So I'm pleased that that the previous speaker has taken the demeanor that she did. I think that is the mature demeanor, that is the welcomed demeanor, as opposed to the demeanor that I believe was displayed earlier, especially in relation to my procedural office colleague, who was at the brunt of an official's ill disposition. So as a legitimate lawmaking entity, Chairperson, I want to just underscore that we will pursue any and every platform to obtain input from officials who are charged to provide that input to us. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Agreed. I think the response provided in terms of the situation is a mature response, and we also appreciate it. I think there are lessons learned here on how we can continue to provide best practice and how we can continue to service those residents who rely on us for lawmaking going forward. But with that, we do appreciate the work that you've done to date, and we will excuse you for the rest of the meeting. Thank you to Ms. Kukumur and to Ms. Dalwa.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Right, members, we'll just give it a moment. Okay, members, let me just check, Ms. Adams, are we all right to proceed with the deliberation and discussion on the negotiating mandate?
Yes, Chair, I think the department has left.
Okay, perfect. All right, members, so we're now, if I can now get an indication from you on whether the committee will confer on the Western Cape's delegation in the NCOP the authorities to support or not support the bill. If you could also provide reasons as to such. And these can be related to the matrix as well as the discussions. I recognize Member van der Westhuizen.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I believe it's now our opportunity to, amongst each other, debate the position and look at the bill. May I first say, when we look holistically at the bill, I think there are more good than not in this bill. But in the same vein, I would like to say I think the department really dropped the ball in terms of what this bill could and should have been. Small enterprises are the backbone of the economy. Small enterprises are also the place where, for the least amount of capital investment, the biggest number of jobs are created. And in a country such as South Africa, with our extreme high unemployment rate, particularly amongst the youth, this piece of legislation should have made significant strides and impact in order to achieve a stimulus for smaller enterprises and to protect our smaller enterprises and to allow them to flourish and play a bigger role in our economy. by, for example, make it easier for them in terms of employment, make it easier for them to be established, make it easier for them eventually to also grow from small enterprises into medium and larger enterprises, because it's quite often at the first hurdle that many entrepreneurs unfortunately fall flat. So in this regard, my proposal would be that we, can I almost say reluctantly, support this piece of legislation, but that in our comments to the select committee, we really point out our disappointment in terms of various aspects. One of them being the fact that small enterprises that are not at all represented in for example, bargaining councils, that they are bound by those agreements reached at in the national level, and which makes it extremely difficult for them to grow and to employ more people and so on. And I would have felt that, you know, some form of exemption for smaller enterprises, some form of incentive for small enterprises to give employment opportunities to the unemployed, that should have been included in here. And unfortunately, this bill is completely silent on any incentives for small enterprises. And I believe this is a most serious omittance from what we have. But all in all, Chair, we all know where we are in terms of the parliamentary season. We all know that at this point in time, unfortunately, I expect the NCOP to be a rubber stamp for legislation, and I seriously would like us to include in our comments to the select committee that even if not in this term, that in the next term, this bill should seriously be given a relook, and that those omissions in the legislation be addressed as soon as possible. But all in all, that we, can I call it, almost reluctantly support. That would be my proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Member. I agree. I think that should be added as a substantive concern with the bill. Advocate Mostorp, if I could also ask you to assist us with the legalese in adding that to a negotiating mandate when we break for the drafting, if that's in order.
Certainly, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Member Seleko, I saw your hand was up for a minute.
No, Chair, I just wanted to flag my concern that it should be noted in terms of public participation. I think you would know which words we are talking about. Advocate Mostorp would also be familiar with our stance in terms of public participation. And and also in terms of the socio-economic impact assessment system integration, Chair, I think that was one of the concerns that or questions that was asked by the Department of Finance, whether there is one and why it was not shared with the stakeholders. That is something of concern. And yeah, Chair, those are and also maybe looking forward, maybe we should also say something about how we should enhance public participation, because every time you go, you seem to find people comment, like having complaints that there's not enough time and the presentation is not in the language that they understand. And maybe, you know, in the seventh parliament, maybe that's something that we should look at in terms of how are we going to make sure that when we deal with legislation, that we actually speak to the people that actually is going to have contributions to this bill, and not just be a compliance exercise and just ticking a box, but you end up not getting value for money, and the people that you are there don't even understand what you are trying to achieve with this public participation. Those are my comments, Chair. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I think that can be noted under procedural concerns, particularly where we deal with insufficient time provided for the legislative process. It can be added there. Members, if you don't mind, I just want to take you through some provisions from my side. I agree that we support the bill, but I would say that we support the bill subject to certain amendments being made. Those notwithstanding, or not leaving out the comments made by members Seleko and member van der Westhuizen. So I'm going to jump straight in. I think the first concern that I have under procedural concerns is just language and drafting of the bill. So the bill contains various errors that require attention, including the outdated use of hereby. So we see that under 17D1, and also vague wording on certain provisions under clause 17Y, which pose a risk of unintended consequences. Also of concern is the term unambiguous business contract and reasonable payment date in clause 17Y2. I think these need to be refined to ensure clarity and effective implementation. So the recommendation under this procedural concern would be to review and refine the language within clause 17Y to make this more precise. Then under socioeconomic impact assessment, so the committee did, upon request, receive the SAES document, which was dated 17 April, but there are some concerns in terms of how the SAES was conducted. And I would just like to note, Member Seleko, once we received that, we did send that as well to the department, as we saw the concern that they had raised. But essentially, there is a question of the risk assessment's completeness. So what we were concerned about is that while the bill does, or the SAES does, address operational and funding risks, it lacks a comprehensive assessment of external economic factors. So things like market dynamics, global economic trends, unforeseen disruptions, which we've seen, for example, with COVID, and that these issues or undefined risks could essentially affect the initiatives that the bill sets out to achieve. So we need a more detailed investigation around these risks. I'm also concerned about the evaluation of the alternatives under the SAES. The SAES outlines alternative solutions like extending the Small Enterprise Development Agency's mandate or equipping local municipalities for support, but a comparative analysis exploring the viability, potential customers, drawbacks of these various alternatives would really provide us with a clearer understanding of their relative merits. And then my final concern on the SAES, members, is that of financial sustainability. So while the document presents costs associated with the proposal, such as including setup, operational requirements, we do need a critical evaluation of long-term financial sustainability, which we don't see. So this would include exploring diverse funding sources, cost effectiveness over time, the potential for self-sustainability, and strategies for financial resilience in various economic scenarios. So really here what we need is an in-depth financial analysis, which will work towards a sustainable approach and consider the dependency of government funding. And then under procedural concerns, members, of course, the issue of insufficient time provided by the legislative or provided for the legislative process. So we know the turnaround time for the bill was very short, and that given the importance of the content which put the entire value chain of legislation under pressure, to process the bill, we were really tested in terms of whether we could ensure meaningful public participation. So the NCOP must be aware of the logistics around this public participation in future, such as requesting advertising, securing venues, and the like, which require a lot of time to do. And the committee, of course, was given a very short time to request information from stakeholders. So this must really be considered for future. We can't be pushing through bills towards the end of the administration and creating a bottleneck which doesn't allow us to do the very best that we can do for those that we are elected to serve. And I think under procedural concerns here, this is where we add Member Seleko's comment about ensuring meaningful public participation and really ensuring stakeholder engagement in a more substantive way going forward. Then under substantive concerns, I think, yes, we must add the concern about incentives for businesses, which was mentioned by Member van der Westhuizen. But broadly, members, there are several themes for me that jump out here in terms of substantive concerns. Those are governance and oversight, legal framework coherence, institutional integrity and efficiency, economic inclusion and support, regulatory and procedural clarity, compliance and reporting, dispute resolution and adjudication, as well as stakeholder engagement and accessibility, interagency and provincial collaborations, transparency and accountability, and then documentation and record keeping. So in terms of governance and oversight, clauses 11.2a and 11.2c, the bill must clearly define the process for appointing the Small Enterprises Development Finance Agency board members, including specific remuneration to prevent unilateral ministerial control and ensure meaningful parliamentary oversight. Still under governance and oversight, clause 11.3, the criteria and scenarios which require a High Court order for appointing a director, which are not recommended by the board, require clarification. Also, endorsement is given for, or I would support rather, the establishing of an UNBUD for regional officers, provided employee compensation is budget conscious and clear definitions of regional officers are established. Provisions for interim UNBUD leaders should limit appointments to 90 days to prevent potential misuse. Then clauses 17G, 7C, as well as 17J and 17M1B, Roman numerals 2. The bill retains an advisory body working alongside the UNBUD service. Both are critical for supportive business ecosystems, yet they require careful management for their broad discretionary powers to avoid abuse. So essentially, this needs to be outlined a bit more. And then the last point under governance and oversight, the bill must specify required qualifications from the UNBUD, as well as the Deputy UNBUD, mandating a law degree and significant experience in relevant fields. Clear guidelines on their appointment and emphasizing transparency, as well as parliamentary consultation, are essential. Then members, moving to legal framework coherence, the bill should not repeat constitutional rights, such as those in clause 17Y2, affirming small enterprises' right to trade and transact freely. Instead, it should focus on specific legal frameworks that uniquely empower and protect small businesses. Sticking with legal framework coherence, the terms related to adjudicate and adjudication in the alternative dispute resolution or ADR process require clearer definition within the bill. Clause 17G1A should be amended to ensure that the language reflects the Ombud's role in resolving disputes amicably without formal court adjudication. This will remove any potential misunderstandings about their functions. Then moving to the theme institutional integrity and efficiency, the committee, I think, we have noted the potential issues with consolidating financial and non-financial support functions in Clause 9's establishment of ZEDFA. So what we need here is clear distinctions between different support mechanisms to avoid overlapping roles and confusion. I would also say that we would support Chapter 3's introduction, creating the Small Enterprise Ombud Service for efficient, fair and economical adjudication of small enterprise complaints. However, I think what we can add here is that we appreciate the Ombud's determination, or what the determinations will have the same legal weight as civil court judgments, aiding in enforceability and possibly reducing litigation costs and time. My concern here, and something that we could possibly add, is the monitoring to ensure these determinations comply with procedural justice and do not overburden the court system. So sticking with institutional integrity and efficiency, we have two more points here. There are concerns about the Ombud's role in capital acquisition, as well, or capital acquisition decision-making, as mentioned in 17G1D. So what I would recommend, members, is that the Ombud's role should be aligned with the strategic oversight rather than executive functions. The bill should be amended to specify that the Ombud approves strategic plans, including capital acquisitions, in line with the agency's objectives. And then the final suggestion under this theme of institutional integrity and efficiency is that the proposed clause 17M1A and B grant the Ombud adjudication powers for final complaint determinations. So what would be recommended is amending the bill to provide clear procedural steps for the Ombud, detailing whether these decisions will be based on oral hearings or document reviews to ensure transparency and fairness. Then members, the next theme that I'd like to just put to you is economic inclusion and support. So I think there is emphasis, or what we can emphasize is the importance of the agency in promoting economic inclusion. This includes both financial and non-financial support for small enterprises, with special attention to those in historically disadvantaged areas. Under this theme, what I would say is that the remuneration for both the Ombud and Deputy Ombud should align with civil service levels, not exceeding level 15, Deputy Director General. This alignment ensures that pay is consistent with public service standards and maintains fiscal responsibility. Under clause 15, especially subclause 15.4, this requires setting clear service standards, including timeframes for the agency to consider and provide financial or non-financial support. Additionally, Section 20 of the National Small Enterprises Act should be referred to for defining these service standards, ensuring that the agency upholds as well as reports on them effectively. And then clause 13, this should be expanded to include the agency's role in fostering economic inclusion. This involves promoting participation and development of small enterprises in areas that are historically disadvantaged or less formal. So what we need here is to support a wide range of entrepreneurial activities and contributions. Members, the next theme is regulatory and procedural clarity. So of course, what we've emphasized is the importance of well-defined regulations and procedures in the context of case fee regulations, financial reporting, and staff remuneration. Members, the current requirement for financial reporting within 3 months after the fiscal year's end, as per clause 17Q3, should be revised. My recommendation here is that it align with the time frame with the 2 months mandated for national departments under the Public Finance Management Act. This change aims to enhance consistency and accountability in government financial practices. I'd also propose, members, amendments to Chapter 3A, specifically Clause 17S1B, to provide detailed guidelines on the types of case fees and small enterprise Ombud may impose. This clarity will essentially ensure more transparency in fee structuring and prevent financial barriers for small enterprises seeking assistance. The last point under this theme, members, refers to Clause 17N4A. It's recommended that staff remuneration within the Ombud service be capped at the level of a chief director or level 14. This would essentially uphold fiscal responsibility and align with existing public service pay scales, ensuring fair and sustainable compensation practices. Moving to compliance and reporting, Clause 17Q3 should be amended to align with financial reporting deadline within the PFMA. This aligns with reducing the current 3-month period to 2 months, enhancing accountability and uniformity across government financial practices. Then Chapter 3A, especially Clause 17S1B, it's recommended that the bill should include comprehensive guidance on the types of fees chargeable for the small enterprise Ombud. So what we need here are clear fee structures to maintain transparency and ensure small enterprises are not financially hindered from seeking the necessary assistance. Moving to dispute resolution and adjudication, so noting clauses 17M1A and B, what's recognized is that the adjudicatory authority granted to the Ombud for resolving complaints, it's noted, but the call is essentially for amendments to provide explicit procedural details, including whether determinations will be made following hearings or based on documentary evidence. The aim is to ensure that the Ombud's adjudication process is both transparent and fair. Another suggestion under this theme is that the following clauses be revised: 17G7A to C, to specify timeframes for actions taken by the Ombud. Current vague wording allows too much discretion, leading to potential delays and possibly also backlogs. And a more structured approach, possibly including regulatory timeframes set by the Minister, is recommended for accountability and efficiency. There's also an overlapping jurisdiction of the Small Enterprise Service Ombud with other Ombud services as outlined in clauses 17I and 17J, and these require addressing. So what would be suggested is that the bill integrates other Ombud services and appeal mechanisms into its scope. The integration would mean that the Small Enterprise Ombud would consider complaints only after the internal address mechanisms have been exhausted, particularly in scenarios where an appeal is court applicable. And then finally, under this theme, clause 17M1BI raises concerns about a lack of clarity in determining fair compensation. So what is recommended is that the bill be revised to establish a well-defined framework or guidelines for the Ombud's decision-making process in this regard. These guidelines would help to ensure more equitable and methodologically sound compensation determinations. Moving to the theme of stakeholder engagement and accessibility, on clause 5 and the proposed section 17W, the committee notes the critical importance of comprehensive stakeholder and education awareness of the Ombud's nature services. But what is recommended is that this section be elaborated to ensure a targeted and inclusive educational strategy. Members, if you could just excuse me for one moment. I just need to attend to a personal matter. Apologies, members. All right. So essentially, the proposal under stakeholder engagement and accessibility would be that the section is elaborated to ensure targeted and inclusive educational strategy, emphasis placed on reaching unrepresented small businesses, particularly those in rural, township and remote areas who are often less informed about available mechanisms. This could involve detailed framework for educational outreach to ensure equitable access to Ombud services across all segments of the business community. And then members, under the theme of interagency and provincial collaboration, the bill needs to clearly define unfair trading practices to avoid excessive regulation and to provide clear guidelines for the protection of small business growth. The Ombud and Minister must collaborate with the Department of Public Service and Administration when establishing national and regional offices, ensuring appropriate resource allocation. So what is acknowledged is that there is a goal of safeguarding small businesses against unfair trading practices as outlined in 17Y, but the concern is about jurisdictional overreach into the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, as well as the Competition Commission. Since these entities are already equipped to handle such claims, the bill should distinguish the roles clearly to prevent redundancy and conflict. The committee, I would say, should also support the idea of the Small Enterprise Ombud assisting the Competition Commission with inquiries related to small business rather than acting independently on unfair trading practices. This would make better use of existing resources and reinforce support systems for small business without encroaching. Then the final point under interagency and provincial collaboration is the involvement and insight of provincial governments. We know that this is crucial for effectively supporting small businesses, especially since issues and needs often emerge at a regional level. So with that, there is a concern that these amendments do not fully empower provinces to significantly impact the administration of the Act. And what is suggested is revising these amendments to strengthen the role and influence of provincial authorities, ensuring that they can meaningfully contribute and shape the support framework for small enterprises within their respective regions. This essentially will enhance and provide a more centralized as well as a responsive approach to small business support and be tailored to the diverse needs and context of different provinces. Second last theme, transparency and accountability. I think one thing that we've observed is that the current language seems to restrict accountability mainly to larger entities, potentially sidelining small and medium enterprises. And so what is recommended is to revise the bill to incorporate more inclusive language. This change will broaden the accountability scope and essentially will encompass all levels of trade and enterprise meaning that we will foster a more equitable and inclusive business environment. And then the last point is under this theme is that essentially we have identified a lack of clarity regarding the range of appropriate recommendations the Ombud is authorized to make. To ensure effective and consistent decision making, what we need is to refine this clause to define the scope and nature of such recommendations more precisely. This will make the Ombud's decision-making process more effective and will also minimize risk of arbitrary and inconsistent interpretations. The goal here is to establish a framework that balances flexibility with the need for clear guidelines, ensuring the Ombud's actions are both effective and accountable. And then the last theme under substantive concerns is documentation and record keeping. So I think one thing that we can emphasize is the need for the Ombud's record keeping practices to be strict or to be in a strict accordance with the Promotion of Access of Information Act, or the PIA Act. And what this calls for is a thorough review of the relevant clause to prevent any conflicts with PIA's rules governing access to public and private records. This would essentially ensure that the Ombud's discretion in releasing records adheres to legal standards for information access and confidentiality, and ensure that this is done in the crucial and prudent manner that it should be done. This would be done in alignment, or this alignment is not just a matter of legal compliance, but it is also a way to maintain transparency and trust. Members, I would then move on to recommendations for amendments based on stakeholder input. So the first is that the function, staffing and funding of the Ombud service should be established to ensure an equitable trading environment. So this relates to clause 5, section 17F1 and 2. Then SEDFA's design and implementation of support programs should enhance the economic contributions of small enterprises and avoid overlapping support structures. This relates to clause 4, section 11.2a. Then proposals for ECG monitoring of big businesses and support for cooperatives. These speak to the general comments made by Mr. Kennedy Ramatsoa. The next is that there was a recommendation from George Municipality on promoting interagency coordination, which must be integrated for the effectiveness of shared efforts. Again, it was noted regarding the wide discretionary powers and recommended that these be revised to guide the decision maker to assist with exercise of discretion. Then the active participation of provincial authority should be provided to effect or to give effect to the bill's implementation. From there was, it was noted that the input on clause 4 concerning the substitution of chapter 3 of the Principal Act, specifically referring to section 13B, what was recommended here is that while the standard national delivery network is uniformly applied, it should incorporate a special focus to ensure that the agency's delivery meets the diverse needs of all businesses seeking support. The agency's function, as outlined in proposed section 13, must consider the geographic and spatial characteristics of businesses, ensuring that support is not only equitable, but also contextually relevant to the prevailing circumstances in each locale. This tailored approach is crucial to avoid undermining the agency's ability to deliver effective services that are responsive to the unique needs of businesses in various environments. Then one thing that is noted is that the amendments to clause 4, particularly the changes to proposed section 16, which now include wording to ensure representation of all 9 provinces. The concern, however, remains that regarding the lack of specificity in the personnel composition of the board, one thing that can be echoed is the need for greater detail in the bill about the board's composition, recommending a prescriptive approach that ensures a balance of skills, such as the requisite number of senior enterprise development and enterprise finance specialists. Additionally, there are concerns about the minister's powers as granted in the proposed clause 11.3 to seek a High Court order to appoint a director not recommended by the board. These are essentially substantial and remain unaddressed. And so what is advised is that this provision be reconsidered to prevent potential circumvention of the board's recommendations and ensure that the board appointments are made transparently and based on merit. The last point under this section dealing with recommendations for amendments based on stakeholder input is relating to clause 5 and the proposed section 17X. So what I would recommend here is that there be emphasis on the importance of explicitly defining the scope and nature of interagency coordination and collaboration. What we need is for the bill to clearly outline how different agencies and departments will work together, ensuring interagency efforts are synergistic and aligned with principles and objectives of the bill. This would facilitate creation of a coherent framework for various institutions listed within the bill to operate collaboratively and strengthen the support ecosystem for small enterprises. Then members, just moving to additional specific amendments. I think here we'd also add the concern made by Enriquez initially. And then just looking at the National Review of Small Enterprises, the bill should mandate the National Review of Small Enterprises to include reports on challenges faced by small businesses and potential solutions. We see this particularly under section 19. Clarity here is needed concerning the mechanisms and regularity of the National Review of Small Enterprises as per clause 6, as well as, as per clause 6, section 19 of the Principal Act. So what is recommended is that the bill specify whether the review is a standing requirement or if it is conducted at the behest of the minister. To ensure a comprehensive and inclusive review process, the bill must be amended to mandate scheduled consultations with relevant public and private sector stakeholders and ensure that results of the national review are published and made accessible to the public. This will facilitate informed decision-making by government and private sector entities and foster a cooperative approach to addressing the needs of SMMEs across South Africa. Then, relating to enhancement of small enterprise competitiveness, the bill should explicitly address red tape challenges and other challenges in competitiveness as suggested by stakeholders, ensuring comprehensive support for small businesses. What the bill should do is clearly outline and reference red tape reduction and ease of doing business as part of the approaches to supporting business. Again, regarding language and drafting errors, to improve the text, it is recommended that the legislative drafter review the bill using generally accepted Commonwealth language drafting processes, as well as use the support of a language practitioner familiar with these practices. On structural provisions for the Ombud Service, in alignment with the objectives of maintaining fiscal responsibility and avoiding willful political neglect, the bill should stipulate consultation requirements with the Department of Public Service Administration and set defined service standards for the establishment of the national and regional Ombud offices. It should also outline the process for the appointment of an acting Ombud, ensuring that temporary leadership is capable and limited in duration to prevent prolonged periods of acting positions. This would essentially hamper the effectiveness of the office if we did have to operate under that circumstance. And then finally, consolidation of functions and clarity in roles. What would be recommended here is that the bill ensures a clear separation between the indicators for financial and non-financial support to effectively monitor and evaluate the agency's support for businesses. So additionally, the alignment with the Principal Act should not impede the distinct functions that foster economic inclusion, particularly for small enterprises in historically disadvantaged and less formal areas, as outlined in the proposed Section 10 of the Act. These provisions should be carefully crafted to ensure that they complement rather than complicate the existing support framework for small enterprises. So members, I put it to you, those are the recommendations that I've submitted on the bill. Are there any concerns? Would you support these? Member van der Westhuizen?
Thank you, Chair. Somebody had to go into all the detail, and we're just grateful that you did that. Thank you for also reading that into the record. I would propose that we support all the points raised by you, and obviously I believe the procedural officer would also take into account other issues raised, including that by myself and the Honourable Seleko, and that we also just get the kind advice or the advice kindly offered by Advocate Maastop in terms of phrasing in legal language some of the issues. But I would like to add my or support then to the detail, and also thank you very much for the hard work in compiling that very extensive input into the bill. We can just hope that the select committee will indeed find the time and energy to really look at this and effectively bring about some amendments to the bill in its current form. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, it was a lot of hard work, but couldn't have done it without the very capable and able assistance of Ms. Adams as well. I recognize Advocate Maastop, sorry, did you have your hand up? Did you want to come in before I recognize Member Seleko?
Oh, I did have my hand up, Chair, but I saw Member Seleko's hand up, so I deferred to the Honourable Member, but I'm in your hands.
Okay, please proceed, and then we'll move on to Member Seleko.
Thanks so much, Chair. Chairperson, just in respect of the concern or observation raised earlier by Member van der Westhuizen pertaining to the Dawood case, I must say I had a minuscule window to quickly dive into the case and get a sense of what is being raised here and what the issue is, or what the mischief is that we seek to address when we do these kind of lawmaking exercises. And thanks to Member van der Westhuizen for that question, because I also now had an opportunity to edify myself as far as this particular case is concerned. Just as a bit of background, this Dawood case involved the application of temporary residence permits, and an official. It so happened that the applicants were South African citizens, their spouses were foreigners, and a member or an official at Home Affairs exercised a discretion and refused an application for temporary residence permits. And that refusal, that discretion, that decision based on that discretion was then litigated upon. And very beautifully and very interestingly and informatively, the court at the time said the following, and let me just, before I proceed with that thought, Chairperson, often when we as lawmakers come across bills or legislation, then there's often a to and fro as to whether someone must do something, whether someone may do something, etc. And we, of course, know how pedantic the law is when it comes to exercising power, exercising authority. And the exercise of an authority or the exercise of a discretion is as elastic as it can be. But of course, over the years, the courts have developed certain criteria, certain moderating mechanisms, if you like, so that officials do not go to town when it comes to exercising their discretion. And we know that we are not going to have instances where a discretion is in all pieces of legislation moderated or guided or just contextualized or limited, etc. However, that being said, the court in this Dawood case says, you know what, when you exercise the discretion, because your discretion will impact on people's rights and constitutional interests, there should at least be some guidance so that the people affected are aware and are familiar with the thinking or the context or the substance behind your discretion. And so that there is also a measure of consistency. It eliminates these guiding principles, that is, it eliminates arbitrariness, it eliminates abuse of office, etc. what we often find when these things end up in court is that the court asks, what's the rationale? What's the rationality, the legal thinking behind your exercising of your discretion, so that there's a correlation, a dialectic between your thinking and the outcome of your thinking, as it should be within your office. In other words, within the exercise of your authority. You don't opt or act ultra vires, outside the prescript of your mandate, your office, your authority. So the court says, you know what, when you have a discretion, there should be the following guidelines. Obviously, these guidelines, the court says, that is, it says the legislature, we, us lawmakers, the court says the legislature should identify the policy considerations that would render a refusal of a temporary residence permit justifiable. That is in that specific case. But the conceptual guide that I take from there is that there is an onus, a responsibility on the legislature to assist with the moderation, with the guiding of a discretion, so that it doesn't go haywire and there isn't abuse of office by errant officials or officials acting beyond the scope of their authority or beyond the scope of their mandate. So I appreciate the question by Member van der Westhuizen, and I think in those instances that are highlighted in the matrix by the Western Cape government, as far as clause 17 is concerned, there are 3 instances I think they highlight that deal with the ombud exercising a discretion. Now, as much as I can argue as a lawyer that a discretion should be moderated and should be rational, the court in the Dawood case says the legislature should provide and identify guidelines to moderate that discretion. So the recommendation by the Western Cape government, as far as that observation is concerned, it says, to the extent that the bill provides for wide discretionary powers, it is recommended that it be revised to provide for guidance to the decision maker, to the extent that guidance is not provided, to assist with the exercise of the discretion. So I think for the protection of citizens, for consistency, for the avoidance of arbitrary exercise of power, we recommend, I suggest that we insert in our mandate, and I'm sure my colleague Saida Adams will capture some of this, we recommend that the discretion in those respective sections or clauses are guided with principles in order to make the exercise of discretion rational, lawful, and in line with court cases, with the court case in Dawood particularly. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I just want to double check, Member Seleko, are you covered? Okay, we're going from his message on the
No,
chat.
Chair, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
No, Chair, I just wanted to echo the sentiments shared by Member Enriquez in terms of the work that you and Ms. Adams has been doing behind the scenes in trying to compiling this comprehensive input for this particular bill. And from the bottom of our hearts, as members of this committee, we really, really appreciate what you two are doing, and also to advocate Masdor for the legal advice that he has been giving to us. So it's highly, highly appreciated. And I think it will be insensitive of me not to actually convey my sincere gratitude towards all 3 of you in this regard, Chair. Thank you very much. And also supporting the mandate as per the proposal from Member Enriquez. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Member Seleko. I think none of the work that we do or what I've achieved to date would be possible by working in silos. And I really do thank you, all the officials who've joined us and made this possible. And to all the members, I'm very, very grateful for all the insights and how seriously you take the work that you do, because we wouldn't have gotten this far down the line without it. But Ms. Adams, if I can draw on you, I believe we can now take a break. If you could just advise for how long so that you can draft the negotiating mandate report.
Thank you, Chair. Can I get until 2:45? I just want to consult Advocate Master on
Okay.
that part.
Cool. Members will reconvene at 11:45. Thank you, members. read in the introduction, and then the sections highlighted in yellow, and then the conclusion. So that is on record. And then if members can give me an indication if there's anything missing or that should be added, and then from there we can wrap up a bit. So I'll just read in the introduction first. Negotiating mandate stage, draft report in the Standing Committee on Finance, Economic Opportunities and Tourism on the National Small Enterprises Amendment Bill B16B 2023. NCOP is 76, dated 15 March 2024 as follows. The Standing Committee on Finance, Economic Opportunities and Tourism, having considered the subject of the National Small Enterprises Amendment Bill B16B 2023 NCOP NCOP S76, refer to it in terms of Standing Rule 217, confers on the Western Cape's delegation in the NCOP the authority to support the bill, subject to the consideration of the concerns and implementation of the proposed amendments outlined below. So as you'll see, we've got a few of those. Under general comments, what has been added is that the committee notes that the small enterprises are the backbone of our economy, but they are also the space with the least amount of capital investment. Small enterprises are important for creation of jobs, particularly in a country such as South Africa with high unemployment. Our member van Westhuizen, I'll recognize you in a moment. Particularly in a country like South Africa with high unemployment rates. This piece of legislation should have made significant strides in attempting to achieve a stimulus for smaller enterprises. The bill should also be protecting small enterprises so they are allowed to flourish and play a bigger role in the country's economy. Member van Westhuizen, I recognize you.
Yes, thank you. May I just, and thank you very much for highlighting that and for capturing it. Can I just ask that the word country, backbone of our country, be the backbone of our economy? Thank you.
Thank you. That amendment has been made. We'll scroll down to the next edition. Okay, so this is an addition to procedural concerns, and it falls under language and drafting. No? Oh, no. Okay, so I think what we need to do here is this additional entrance here, we can just scroll down, relates to public participation. So we need to make another subheader, 2.2, public participation. So it's not confused with the recommendation or concern. Apologies, so that it's not concerned.
I think it's got more to do with the language. That's why it's under the language. I mean, I can't change it, but the main concern was the language issue.
Okay. Members, are we happy with that?
Happy?
Everybody's great. Okay, I'll just read that in then. The record, during the public participation process, there were concerns about language in which the bill was presented. The bill should be presented in the language that the members of the public understand. Right, we can scroll down. Under insufficient time provided for the legislative process, what we've added is national government must look at enhancing public participation in respect of the legislative process to ensure proper consultation with members of the public that are impacted by the bill. Okay, now we move to substantive concerns, the addition here around lack of representation and incentives. It is noted that the small enterprises are not at all represented in bargaining councils, but they are bound by agreements reached at the national level. This makes it extremely difficult for small enterprises to grow and to employ more people. The bill is silent on incentives for small enterprises. The bill should have addressed and included some form of incentive for small enterprises to provide employment opportunities to the unemployed. All right, you can scroll down. The next addition under substantive concerns is wide discretionary powers. The bill contains numerous provisions that afford the Umbud and other parties very wide discretionary powers without substantive guidance as to how they should exercise the discretion. See, for example, the proposed section 17G, 7C, 17J, 17M1B, Roman numeral 2. Where legislation provides for discretionary powers for a decision maker, these should be appropriately guided to assist the decision maker with its functions and to mitigate the risk of abuse of power. Please refer to the principles in Darwood versus Minister of Home Affairs, Shalabi versus Minister of Home Affairs, Thomas versus Minister of Home Affairs, 2003 SA 936 CC. Additionally, to the extent that the bill provides for wide discretionary powers, it is recommended that it be revised to provide guidance for the decision maker to the extent that guidance is not provided to assist with the exercise of the discretion. Should we say of the discretion or of that discretion? Perhaps Advocate Marstal, if you can help us with the wording here.
Chairperson, even as it stands there, it doesn't lead to any ambiguity or unclarity.
Okay.
Because it refers specifically to the discretion by the Ombud. So the exercise of the discretion, that discretion is of discretion in general. I think the idea to be captured there is the fact of the moderation of discretion. So the discretion is certainly apt, but I think of discretion would be more accurate, yes.
Yeah, I prefer using a verb than a noun. Okay, yes, that feels better. Okay. All right, and then added to conclusion, I'll read the entire conclusion for the record. The committee's negotiating mandate, informed by the substantive stakeholder feedback, supports the National Small Enterprises Amendment Bill B16B 2023 if amendments addressing transparency, governance, clear definitions of unfair trading practices, and reducing administrative burdens are incorporated. I wonder if we should say, I'm not sure if we should limit it to these categories, which seem a little bit vague, but rather to say if the amendments proposed in the negotiating mandate are made, rather than saying if amendments addressing transparency, governance, clear definition, etc., are incorporated. I think we need to be more clear that we want our amendments to be made. Advocate Moslow, did you want to come in here? I saw your hand.
Yes, Chair. In fact, once we limit it to that, then we are limited to that. But the content above that speaks to other recommendations as well. For example, the issue of discretion, moderation. So if we're going to list, we should be all inclusive. Otherwise, we do not list.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, so if the amendments in the negotiating mandate, proposed by the negotiating mandate, are made. Okay, well, that's added. I'll read the rest. However, the committee also recommends that in the next term, the National Parliament should seriously consider this piece of legislation and address any omissions found in this bill as soon as possible. So while Ms. Adams finishes that up, it is noted that we do not have a minority view. And so members, if we could get a proposer for this draft, for this report. Member van der Westhuizen.
Thank you. I propose that we adopt.
Thank you very much. Do we have a seconder? Member Seleko.
My apologies, Chair. Can you repeat yourself? There was issues with my network.
Do you second Member van der Westhuizen's proposal to adopt?
Wholeheartedly, Chair. Wholeheartedly. Thank you very much. Second him.
Oh, wonderful. So nice and easy. Okay, members. With that, I just want to check in and see if there are any resolutions before we adjourn. I see none. Okay, members. Thank you very much for your Member van der Westhuizen.
Just a question. When are we meeting again, Chair?
I believe on Friday. But Ms. Adams, you can perhaps inform us if there have been any developments.
And that is
Thank you.
that's also online, if I understood correctly.
Okay, Ms. Adams.
Thank you, Chairperson. Yes, I've just received confirmation from Michaela that we will be sitting on Friday morning. So from 8 until 1 p.m. virtually. And that will be on the negotiating mandate on the public procurement bill, and then as well as 2 final mandates, one on the upstream petroleum bill and one on this bill, on the National Small Enterprise Bill.
Thank you very much. Member van der Westhuizen, are you happy?
Not happy that everything must be rushed, but that is outside of our control, and we'll do our best to comply with these, I believe, unreasonable time pressures. But yeah, I intend to be there. Thank you.
I share your sentiments, Member van der Westhuizen. But yes, we'll, from our side, keep communications as open as possible, because we know that this is a very, very stressful time, and these backlogs and delays, and it just adds so much more pressure that isn't necessary, and it doesn't serve those that we are elected to represent. But members and officials, thank you for all of the support that you've provided, all of the input that you've provided. I think that we've done the best that we can under a very difficult situation. And with that, I want to say thank you, and meeting adjourned.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, colleagues. See you next week.
See you Friday.
This week, Friday. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
I know. Thank you.
Just testing.
Bye.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, everyone. And a special thank you to Ms. Adams for tolerating us all.
It's a job, Chairperson.